Welcome to the Holy Post, and have we got a show for you. Today's episode is all content from our recent live event in Chicago. Phil, Kaitlyn, and I discuss the rapid shift in public opinion about immigration. And it's not just among Republicans. Why is support for immigration down dramatically among Democrats and independents as well? Then we're joined by Charlie Dates, the pastor of Progressive Baptist Church and Salem Baptist Church in Chicago. He talks to us about the widening gap between the black church and white evangelicalism, why he's so tired about talking about evangelicalism, and where he sees the future of the church in the U.S. Then Holy Post producer Mike Stralow challenges us to a quiz he calls the Holy Post decathlon. All of that, plus Al Pacino says there's no afterlife, and scientists discover strategically constipated tadpoles. As I said, this episode is all from our recent live event, but there's actually another 30 minutes more that we couldn't fit here. That 30 minutes includes more audience questions, Phil deliberating about whether or not to leave Twitter, and more ukulele sing-alongs. However, you can get access to the entire unedited live show if you become a Holy Post Plus supporter. Right now, we're offering a 1-week free trial of Holy Post Plus so that you can get access to that full show. And our hope is that you'll see all of the other amazing content and decide to stay. That content includes things like full episodes of the Skye Pod, Getting Schooled by Kaitlyn Chess, the Holy Post Book Club, live streams, exclusive merch, and way more. So head over to holypost.com to get your free 1-week trial of Holy Post Plus. Here is episode 640.
3, 2, 1. Let's bring out Phil and Skye and Kaitlyn. Hello. Yeah, any more? Anyone else? Anyone? Okay.
Who's cleaning that up?
Not me. Is my mic on? What's the news? Oh, there it is. Everybody, sing with me. What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Skye and Phil and the Holy Post. Skye and Phil and the Holy Post. And sometimes Kaitlyn. All right. How you been, Skye?
I'm good.
You're not wearing a hat?
No hat.
No hat?
I don't wear hats on stages.
Really?
Mm-mm.
I wasn't aware of that rule.
When I've traveled and spoken, which I did a bunch this fall, I would fly home, I'd walk in the door, I'd have a hat on. I might be dressed like this because I was speaking somewhere and I'd have a baseball hat on. And the first thing my wife will say is, "You didn't wear that on stage, did you?" I'm like, "No, I don't wear my hats on stage."
It would help with your shiny head problem.
It would. That's actually why I wear it when we record the podcast, because the lights in my office.
To not frighten people.
Yeah, there's a lot of glare.
Yeah, but it's good glare. There's bad glare and there's good glare. Yours is the glare of studiousness.
Something like that.
Yeah. Hi, Kaitlyn. How are you?
Hi, Phil. I'm good.
We're not used to doing this in the same physical location.
It's a little weird.
Yeah, it is a little weird. Like, you're still there.
You're a real person.
You're still there. We have some news, which we try to do regularly. And we have some news this week too. And this is kind of big, actually. This just in. Hang on, I'm pulling it up. My news.
This is how it actually really goes.
This is
yeah.
the real.
Yeah.
This is how a show goes.
We as believers are motivated by the idea of life after death. Correct? That's a.
We believe in life after death.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. And we think there's more in beyond, and this isn't the end. Turns out we're wrong.
I don't think so.
Turns out, after a near-death experience, Al Pacino says there's no afterlife.
Al Pacino?
Yeah.
Why is this a reliable source?
There's no life after Godfather Part 2. We know that.
He says Speaking to the New York Times to promote his upcoming memoir, Sonny Boy, Pacino said that he was infected with COVID. It led to severe dehydration. He nearly died from COVID-19 in 2020, and while he was nearly dead, is that really a medical term?
No.
Nearly dead. He says, "I didn't see the white light or anything. There's nothing there. Hoi!" He says, "My pulse was gone. It was so, you're here, you're not." I thought, whoa, you don't even have your memories. You have nothing.
Isn't that Pa Grape? Are we doing
Strange
Pa Grape?
porridge. No. That's Al Pacino. It's distinct. So
Hold on a second. Do you know who Al Pacino is? I don't think
I
she
mean,
knows.
I can tell it's a name I should know, but I don't. And I can tell from what Phil is saying that he's old.
well, he's 84 now.
Okay, so yes.
But, you know, he's a famous theologian. I'm surprised.
I know that's not true. I know that's not true.
He's a famous actor.
I thought maybe something like
He's
that.
a famous actor that
In The Godfather.
in movies.
Among
in
other
movies.
things.
In
Yeah.
movies. Yeah, many.
Okay, I've heard of those.
Anyway, Al Pacino, I just think this is important. Al Pacino had a near-death experience and verified that he saw no light. He was not pulled into a tunnel. Nothing happened. There's no life after death.
When he was near death. So he was very sick.
He said,
and nothing
no.
happened.
He said at one point he had no pulse.
Okay.
So,
Well,
so that's something.
I mean, this made the news?
Well, it made the Holy Post. So,
Phil found it interesting. So
because most people aren't interested in that, because most people don't have as much at stake in the quest for, God and eternal life as we do. Like NBC News, what do they care? They don't care. So he says there's no eternal life.
I
NBC,
wasn't really waiting for Al Pacino's answer to this question.
You didn't even know who he was.
Exactly.
So how could you?
Exactly.
But does he, I have no idea of anything about him personally. Does he have any faith? Is he,
That's a good question.
like Martin Scorsese's a well-known
Oh, yeah.
committed Catholic.
He is.
Who Al Pacino's been in some of his movies.
True.
I think.
Yes.
They kind of have the whole mobster movie thing. But I've never heard about Al Pacino if he's a committed Catholic or a Christian or anything.
Well, not anymore. Not since his COVID near-death experience, because he no longer believes in the afterlife.
Well, did he believe in the Christian idea of the afterlife?
I don't know.
so we
Not
don't know
anymore.
that
I don't really care.
his beliefs may not have changed at all.
I don't know. I just read the news.
I think we should talk to him.
Yeah, let's get him
Mike,
on the
where's
show.
Mike? Get him on the show,
Get
Mike.
him on the show. He's 84.
So
'Cause we have
Mike,
some
do
good
it quick.
news.
He's 84. What?
We have some good news to share.
Yeah, we have good news, Al. Good news.
You don't need to see a
It's
tunnel
not-
to believe
you don't need to
in the
see a
resurrection of the dead and the life
But you know what?
everlasting.
That's right.
I'm kind of glad he didn't experience anything. Because if he had,
Yeah.
every Christian publisher would be after him to write
yes.
a heaven tourism book.
Yeah, right.
And you know how I feel about those. So
I do know how I do know how you
Phil,
feel
no.
about those. In fact, I think we all know how you feel about those. I was only supposed to do one silly story. They said only do one silly story and then do one serious story, and then we have to get on with the guests because it's a packed agenda. Packed agenda. But I can't only do one.
This is mean.
What?
You're being mean.
Am I being mean? No. This is giving the people what they want.
Stop it!
And now it's time for news of the butt. Hey! Don't even act like you're
Boo,
surprised.
yeah, I heard that.
Hey.
There were some
No,
boos.
they were booing your
I
negative
don't
reaction.
think so. I don't think
That's
so.
what they were booing. There's a peculiar animal in the
No.
deep, dark jungles of Japan. You with me so far?
No, I'm never with you.
I didn't even know Japan had deep, dark jungles, so I was like, oh, I'm in. What's the rest of the story? There's a peculiar animal in the deep, dark jungles of Japan that has taught itself not to poop. Okay?
Okay.
You're kind of with me? It's called Eiffinger's tree frog.
We could workshop that.
There's a frog, It lives in a tree and apparently was discovered by a guy named Eifinger. Eifinger's tree frogs live on the islands of Ishigaki and Iriomote in Japan. They raise their young, what are young frogs called?
Tadpoles.
Oh, yeah.
Yay!
Yeah.
Thank you. It wasn't a pop culture reference. It was just basic
I thought you were
science.
making a joke.
No. They raise their young in small isolated water bodies such as tree hollows and bamboo stumps. So tiny little pools of water away from prying predators. But these little hard to reach pools present the frog and its tadpoles with a problem. Most other species that excrete toxic ammonia in their poop live in larger bodies of water, which can readily dilute the ammonia and are therefore harmless. But the Effinger's tree frog excessive pooping in their confined pools causes ammonia to build up rapidly, leading to toxicity and endangering their survival. So they've evolved or been created by God or all of the above to know that for the first few months of their lives, they can't poop. So they just don't.
Okay.
So where does it go?
It's pretty great. They hold it in.
That's not right.
Ted?
I know, I agree.
The frogs only begin to defecate once they transition from tadpoles to subadults, when their waste can be safely expelled outside their spawning site. Have you ever gone to camp as a kid?
Oh my
And it was
gosh.
like, I've never gone to the bathroom
my gosh.
away from my house.
I've been to whole foreign countries and never left a deposit.
So it's the same idea. The question is, how do
This
they...
was so close to being okay. And
Question is, and there are a few questions here, but one of them is, how do they know? How do you know? Oh, you're a tadpole. They have tiny,
we got that.
tiny little voices. Oh, if I poop, I die. How do they know? And so how do they come up with the solution? Oh, I'll just hold it.
Do you think it's peer pressure? Because if one of them does it, they're all toast?
And they can't point, they don't have arms.
Here's what I want to know.
Yeah.
This was recently discovered?
Yeah.
Why did we not know it before?
How familiar were you with Effinger's
I just figure scientists knew
and their
things.
bathroom habits? This is such a, do you know how many frogs there are in the world?
No.
A gazillion. This isn't pop culture. A gazillion frogs in the world, and they can't study. Skye?
Okay.
Ready for your sermon illustration?
No. But I do have a question because, just biologically, the whole reason that we expel things from our bodies, whether it's carbon dioxide or anything else, is because it's not good to keep it in your body. It will kill you if you keep it in your body.
Yeah.
So you get rid of it. So if you can't get it out of your body, in the case of these tadpoles, because it will become a toxin in your little pool.
Yeah.
So you're keeping it in your body. That can't be good either. So what do? There's got to be some evolutionary solution to this, right?
Yeah. The research team found that the frogs have developed a high tolerance to the ammonia holding it in their intestines.
So the ammonia outside of their bodies would
Will
be
kill
dangerous
them.
to them, but not
Right.
Not
That's it.
inside.
Exactly.
I don't have all the, you're going to have to ask God about this, because this is God's amazing design for Eifinger's tree frogs.
Amen.
I don't know. It doesn't seem right. I think they just might need to go extinct.
No, every frog is precious.
Of course, Skye is for survival of the fittest.
Anything we learn.
I don't know. It just seems inefficient.
Does it? Well, which makes a better sermon illustration? The tree frog not pooping or Al Pacino not seeing
Well,
an
I am
afterlife?
biased towards anything Godfather,
Yeah.
obviously.
Okay.
So I would do the Al Pacino sermon illustration.
Okay. Which is what?
Okay, this is proof that we do not see these things in advance, because I would have had an answer
Never.
to that.
Never.
Never? Well, I don't know. Maybe there's a connection to the Lazarus story, right? He actually did die.
Yeah.
We never got a report on what he saw or didn't see. So who cares?
That's the application point of Skye's sermon. Who cares?
Quite a sermon illustration.
That's great. Wow.
Couldn't you apply this? Can we apply Lazarus to the tree frog in some way?
Well, that application could apply also
in a
to the
small area, confined space, death is a risk.
No, this is it.
Okay.
The tree frog illustration is beware the yeast of the Pharisees.
Oh my God.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And you've polluted the whole thing, you know?
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Don't encourage him. Don't.
That was terrible. Can't play my ukulele anymore. This has been the news of the butt. Okay, done. Thank you. Okay. All right, we have a story about the most dramatic shift in U.S. public opinion. How quickly U.S. public opinion about immigration has changed over the past 4 years, and it has changed faster, statistically speaking, than almost any public opinion shift in recent memory that they've been able to look at. Okay, America's immigration debate has taken a restrictionist turn. Hey, Phil, why are you talking about immigration so much? Well, I don't know if you noticed, but we have this presidential election coming up, and immigration has kind of become a thing. It's kind of become a thing. I don't know if you're old enough to remember 2016, but I am. And I remember a certain political figure came on the scene. It was actually 2015. I believe he came down a means of conveyance that descends. And he came up to the microphone and he said, I'm running for president and we need to build a wall because Mexico is sending us, they do not send us their best people, they send us rapists and criminals. And I remember thinking, well, that's the end of that. You can't be that openly anti-immigrant and get anywhere in politics in America. That is honestly what I thought, especially right after the party that he had chosen had done a post-mortem about the prior election and said we need to be more open and welcoming to immigrants if we're going to ever win again. So 8 years ago, Donald Trump declared that when Mexico sends its people, they're not sending the best. That rhetoric, extreme at the time, seems mild now. This is in The Atlantic this month. Today, he depicts immigrants as psychopathic murderers responsible for poisoning the blood of our country and claims that he will carry out the largest deportation operation in the history of America. But Democrats have shifted too. In 2020, Joe Biden ran on the promise to reverse Trump's border policies and expand legal immigration. When asked about her stance on immigration, Vice President Kamala Harris touts her background prosecuting transnational criminal organizations and promising to pass legislation to, quote, fortify the southern border. So we've had radical shifts against immigrants on both sides, more on the Republican side, but also on the Democratic side. Politicians are responding to one of the most dramatic swings in the history of U.S. public opinion. In 2020, 28% of Americans told Gallup that immigration should decrease. Just 4 years later, in 2024, that has gone from 28% up to 55%, which is the highest level since 2001, right after 9/11. If you remember, we had some immigrant fears around 9/11 as well. Republican attitudes have shifted the most, but Democrats and independents have also soured on immigration. So political scientists are looking at this. This is where it gets interesting. I've long observed that public opinion tends to move in the opposite direction of a sitting president's rhetoric, priorities, and policies, especially when the president is a polarizing figure. So if there is a president who is a polarizing figure and he stakes out this position, you will see American public opinion swing in the opposite direction. Fascinating.
Except that's not what happened. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not. Did you read the story?
No, I didn't have time.
Oh, you didn't read the story.
I skimmed it. It really quickly.
Okay. So
I did my homework. Just wanted to put it out there.
Ring the bell, Phil. She gets another point.
This phenomenon has a name. It's known as the thermostatic public opinion phenomenon. So the thermostat swings away from where a president is. No president has kicked the thermostat into action quite like Trump. In response to his incendiary anti-immigrant rhetoric, including the Muslim ban and family separation, being pro-immigrant became central to Democratic identity. In 2016, only 30% of Democrats told Gallup they wanted to increase immigration, but by 2020, that had grown to 50%. Okay? Just 4 years. Under Trump, Democratic attitudes towards immigration levels warmed more than they had in the prior 15 years.
Right. This is negative polarization.
No, it's the thermostatic public opinion.
It's when your opponent takes a position that you didn't really care anything about before, but because they've taken a strong position, you react by doing the opposite, even though you never really thought about it.
Sure. Like a thermostat. Like me and my wife with the thermostat. She takes a position on the thermostat that I don't like. And so I react, and I go the other way.
Okay.
This is an issue for you guys?
Where is she?
She's in here somewhere. Where are you? Oh, hi.
Hi, Lisa.
You didn't have to sit in the...
Seems very passive-aggressive to be arguing with your wife via thermostat.
Yeah, like you're trying to get support for your side.
The thermostat works both ways. When Biden took office, he immediately rescinded many of Trump's border policies and proposed legislation to restore humanity and American values to our immigration system. This triggered a backlash. That, in addition to, it made America seem more inviting, so many more immigrants started showing up at the border. And so right-wing media and Republican politicians sought to turn Biden's policies into a liability. By mid-2022, the percentage of Republican voters who said immigration should decrease had risen by 21 points. So the paradox of Trump was that he inspired an unprecedented positive shift in immigration attitudes, but because it was a reaction to Trump himself, that positivity was extremely fragile. And when Trump was gone and Biden came in, and particularly, and this is my point as a visual storyteller, we tend to be influenced by the images we see, by the images we're shown. We were suddenly shown lots of images of caravans coming to the southern border, and boom, the thermostat flies back the other way. So, what's your point, you ask? Is that what you were asking?
Often.
It is. I hadn't thought about the fact that well, you see the same thing in 2020 with George Floyd, and everybody wants to talk about racial justice, and some people even made videos about racial justice that were shared more widely than they were thought. And then you have this backlash, and all of a sudden people are really, really opposed to talking about racial justice because we don't like the way you talked about racial justice. So we're gonna, so you make the anti-racist documentary, and then you make the anti-racist documentary, and back and forth we go. I assume the anti-racist documentary only gets made when there's a Democrat in office, because that's what we're pushing against. It's a double negative.
It reminds me of when Obama was president and they were trying to push the Affordable Care Act through. There was a very concerted effort on the Republican side to oppose it. And remember the death panels and all the, the scary things that were being put forward. Obama leaves office, Trump comes in, there's a real effort to overturn the Affordable Care Act. And then when you started actually polling Republican voters about, do you want to lose your health insurance for pre-existing conditions? And they freak out. No, you can't do that because now it's no longer just opposition to the president that they didn't like. They actually want the healthcare benefits. So we're just reacting to the person in the White House that we like or don't like by taking the opposite position. Right. But there's no real principle behind it.
So we're the church, right? We're the church, and we are kind of stuck in the middle here, and we're watching the fight over the thermostat, basically. We're the kids in the back seat, and mom and dad are fighting over them.
They don't have dual zone climate
control. No, they don't have dual zone,
right.
And that's the problem. And that's why Texas wants to secede again, because that's the equivalent of dual zone thermostats, or the closest we can get. So what can the church do? Because we tend to think, we have to. Do we countervail in both directions? Do we have to say, actually, you're going too far this way? No, you're going too far this way. How do you How can you be consistent when the images we see on TV are always pushing us to one extreme or the other?
I love this because just last week I was at a conference and I was talking about immigration and hospitality and kind of a Christian biblical reason to, regardless of policy, to care for the foreigner, but also on level of policy that I've said this a ton on the podcast. The Old Testament teaches, the whole of Scripture teaches, but especially the Old Testament, nations are judged by how they treat foreigners. And after my talk, this woman came up to me and she was really distraught. And it was along the lines of what you just said, Phil, where she was like, I want to be hospitable. I'm concerned about being a good Christian, but I've seen these images and I've heard people talk about this, and there are violent hordes coming to the border and they're funded by third parties. And she was saying all this stuff. And the whole time she's talking, I'm like, you're captive to some conspiracy theories. There is no way I can say anything that will reason with you. And I'm so glad that Skye and I went to the border with World Relief. What was that?
It was like a year ago.
Yeah.
In October. Yeah, it was a year ago.
Yeah. And it was so helpful because when I said to her, like I first said, and I think this is important, like, if that was true, that would be really scary. Like, I can understand why you're afraid. And I said, I know that there's a lot of information out there and it's hard to figure out what to believe and who to listen to, but I was at the border and I talked to a Border Patrol agent and I was in churches on both sides of the border, and that is not happening. Like, I can just tell you there are people that are flagging down Border Patrol agents to declare themselves. There are churches on both sides trying to be faithful. And I was honestly stunned. Her immediate reaction was just like, oh, that's not true? And I don't think everyone is that easily convinced, but I was both, one, stunned by the fact that it's possible. Like, she really was surprised to learn. And I think it mattered to her that I was saying, I have been there, not just here's a different news source to counter the news source that you have. But also, it was helpful for me to see in real time in her face that it was actually a relief to realize that this scary thing was not true. And it gave me a tiny bit more compassion for the people that I think are going in way extreme directions when it comes to immigration, to say, oh gosh, like, I have good news to offer you, not just eschatologically, which really matters. I have good news to say that even if there was this serious threat to your life, that we believe in the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. But also I have the good news to say, like, this scary thing that you're believing is not true. And for us as the church to act like that's outside of the bounds of what we're supposed to do, because we're supposed to just preach the gospel, is to not only, we've talked about this a ton, to misunderstand what the gospel is, but also to say, like, we are supposed to be truth tellers and we're supposed to comfort people. And in this case, I could say to her, this thing that you've been captive to that you believe is not actually true. And again, like, I feel like I say this a lot on the podcast too, but like, it's possible that the Holy Spirit is working in someone and changing their mind. And I got to watch her really just be relieved that this thing she was scared of is not true.
But I have had a hard time pulling that off on Twitter.
So what I think we're learning is that that's about Twitter. Maybe.
All right, this is what I always do. I agree with Kaitlyn, 100%.
But you're going to be just somber and cynical.
No.
Now you realize you are about to be somber.
Point for Kaitlyn.
Hold on. Like, it grieves me a little bit that, I mean, the churches, we're not called first and foremost to be journalists who are investigating what's going on at the southern border and making sure that the rest of the American public knows the truth. That's what journalists are supposed to do.
That's why we send Kaitlyn.
But, like, it bothers me that I know there are Christian journalists all over this country, embedded in all kinds of news organizations. Why aren't they standing up and saying, we will not tell lies? We won't be a part of an institution that's going to mislead the public. We are not going to support. So, I mean, this has been annoying me for a long time, because I've had the same experience as I get around the country and I talk to wonderful people and they start sharing what amounts to conspiracy theories, and I'll ask them things like, well, where do you get most of your news from, or what sources you get? And it's usually social media, not Phil, or certain news outlets.
That's on you.
And what grieves me is they've obviously invested these news outlets with a degree of trust, and it's evident that there's a lack of virtue in the media, and they are being led astray by people who know better.
Okay, here's a problem. I think I've identified a new problem. Because you mentioned we as Christians need to be truth tellers. There is the impression among many Americans today that truth telling only happens on the fringes. Yeah. And the center is always corrupt. The consensus is always paid. And so you can only, and I see people just bouncing between fringes, I found a new doctor who says this, I saw it on YouTube, and I found there's a website that's really telling the truth about Gaza, and I found this, and all of the mainstream has become colloquial for, liar, effectively. So what can we do as the church when we now associate truth-telling with the fringier the better?
I mean, I think one thing to say is that actually the consensus that we kind of remember having in the last 200 years of like what is verifiable fact and what is, fiction is a pretty recent thing. Like the idea that there were like authorities that could tell you like scientifically this is what's true. Prior to that, like when the church was born, there's a swirling set of claims about how bodies work and what God is most powerful and all. So Christianity's always existed in the context of like big competing truth claims that are not universal for the community they're in. But this is actually why I say the thing about going to the border. Not everyone obviously needs to go to the border. But I think what made the difference for this woman was my personal experience. And the funny thing is, I didn't actually have to go to the border to do that. I could have told her, I live in a city, I know Chicago is the same, but I live in a city that has a lot of immigrants, and I've met a lot of them, and I've heard a lot of their stories, and they've told me how they got here and what their needs are, and I've talked to their kids, and their kids are in the public schools and trying to learn English, and they have certain needs, and that personalizing of it and that making it much smaller, I think really matters. Not that it doesn't matter if people in our churches are believing conspiracy theories at big national global levels. It totally does. But on some level, we're kind of powerless to just, magically make them change their minds about those things and believe the kinds of sources we think are legitimate. But I do wish a lot of us, instead of fighting online back and forth, here's a bunch of like, here's my news source I trust, here's your news source that you trust. Instead, it was like, we're going to set up an apartment on Sunday. This is actually true in my church. We're going to set up an apartment on Sunday for some new people making asylum claims that are living in North Carolina. Do you want to come? We can show you what their lives are actually like. You can meet the World Relief staff that actually help them and that know a lot about policy and are Christians. And some of them go to your church and you can trust them. And that's not going to fix all of the conspiracy claims that people believe. But I think a lot of us think we're doing something by getting angrier and angrier online when we could actually show up in our communities and do something to help.
Begrudging point.
I think when the history books are written on this era, one of the dominant themes is going to be, and I think this explains the rise of Trump and the MAGA movement and all that, its dominant feature is going to be the consistent distrust of institutions. I mean, just today, my wife was mentioning this to me, there's this whole thing going around online right now about Kamala Harris's interview on 60 Minutes. Have you guys seen, like, Trump has made this whole deal saying they edited her interview and you can't trust the media. And when you actually read about it, which I did today and looked into it because I was doing that instead of reading this article. Sorry, Phil.
Thanks.
Like, it's just normal editing that all the news networks do to piece things together, but they made it into a conspiracy theory. And that's what his primary currency has been. You can't trust anyone. You can't trust any institution. You can't trust the Justice Department. You can't trust the media. You can't trust anyone except me. And that deterioration of trust in institutions sounds great, and that's why we go to the fringes to get the real answer, but you can't sustain a society that way. And actually, the part that worries me the most is we've now accepted that virus into the church. Yes, there's a lot of church abuse, and there's terrible stories out there all the time of leaders that do terrible things, but we have spun that into, you can't trust your church either. You can't trust your pastors. You can't trust anyone in leadership. You can't trust denominations. You can't trust anyone. And then it's like, well, who do I then go to find out this? So once you've lost all trust in anyone but some anonymous nut job on the internet, we're in trouble. Like, we have to learn how to trust each other again, and hopefully we can begin to model that in our congregations. And even when trust is broken because somebody made a mistake or a leader abused their power, we have the tools given to us in Scripture and through Christ to restore trust when it's lost. But we need to model that for the rest of the culture that doesn't have those tools. Otherwise, we're just going to be lost without institutions of any kind.
The Holy Post is sponsored by the National Association of Evangelicals. Do you feel the tension in the air? Maybe it's at the dinner table or in your church or just anytime you hop on social media. In our increasingly divided country, disagreement has become hostility. So what's the role for Christians in this moment? How do we heal rifts and wrestle with complicated topics in a world that feels increasingly divided into sides and prefers simple sound bites over thoughtful engagement? The Difficult Conversations podcast, hosted by Walter Kim, president of the National Association of Evangelicals, shares incredible stories of people who have stepped out of safe circles, sometimes into enemy territory, to build bridges and repair relationships. You'll hear from experts on why difficult conversations are so hard, how to have them, and why they matter for the kingdom of God. In the first episode, Jonathan Haidt, one of the world's foremost thinkers in social psychology, starts at the beginning and helps us understand why we are just so polarized. Look for the Difficult Conversations podcast on your favorite podcast app.
Americans have a pretty unhealthy relationship with the news, and Christians aren't exempt. We tend to either engage obsessively and be overcome by anxiety or check out completely. News organizations are part of the problem, hooking audiences with fear, anger, and sensationalism, plus a heavy dose of partisanship. The Pour Over is different. They're a free news resource that stays politically neutral and pairs news stories with an eternal perspective. Their newsletter comes to your inbox on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, summarizing your need-to-know updates in a way you'll actually understand and enjoy. In 6 minutes or less, they'll catch you up on what's going on in the world and point you towards eternal hope. I regularly read the Pour Over, and I love that they pair informative news with important reminders of Christian truth. To stay informed while remaining focused on Christ, go to thepourover.org/holy-post and subscribe to The Pour Over for free today. To stay informed while remaining focused on Christ, go to thepourover.org/holy-post and subscribe to The Pour Over for free today, or search for The Pour Over today wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks again to The Pour Over for sponsoring this episode.
We do have a guest tonight. He needs no introduction. This man is a Chicago native through and through, a world-renowned speaker. He is the senior pastor at Progressive Baptist Church and Salem Baptist Church. Give it up for Charlie Dates! Hey! Charlie! Hey, man! Should I go behind? Oh, no, go in front. Go.
Thanks for the theme music.
Your people told us you had to have that music to come out.
That or my theme music for prom is probably not incredibly appropriate.
Yeah.
You had theme music for prom?
I did, man. Every hero has to have theme music. So I did.
What was it?
I don't want to say it, Brandon.
Yeah, I don't
You
wanna-
brought it up.
It's called sexual healing.
Oh, that's good.
There was none of that going on.
Yeah.
But it's just the swagger content. That's you appear to be that
nice
hero.
Yeah. Cool. So you've been on the show a number of times. You're one of our favorite people.
Thank you, Phil.
You're currently pastoring 2 churches simultaneously and making it look easy, effortless. Esau Macaulay is he still he's starting something.
He's planting a church in Naperville because he's an Anglican and he couldn't stick with the Baptist thing. It's a true story.
He just wanted to bring down the beats per minute a little bit.
I think he would enjoy all of that if we actually took time to do communion the way that with a robe and other stuff that he would enjoy.
It
works better in Naperville.
Yeah, because when I think Naperville, I think not enough churches. We just need a few more.
Or Oak Park, one of those. Naperville, Oak Park. But same issue, yeah.
Yeah. Do you wanna go first?
Who wants to? Let Kaitlyn go first.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Well, I feel
You won the previous segment. Does that mean you get to go first?
Well, I would be curious. We were just having a conversation about not only immigration in the United States, but about polarization and negative polarization, about how when one party takes a position, if you're on the other team, you have to take the opposite position, sometimes to the most extreme. How are you seeing that in your churches or in the church more broadly? Are you seeing folks take political positions for those kinds of reasons? And is it possible to talk them out of them?
Well, thank you, first of all, for the invitation to be here with you all. Phil and Skye, I've known them for a while. It's always an honor to hear your thoughtful commentary. Kaitlyn, good to meet you. I would, first of all, say I'm Black in America and I'm a Christian. That colors my response. I don't think Black Christians in America have ever had a kind of party to go to in our back pocket. People today forget that although the majority of Black people in urban metropolises like Chicago vote Democratic, that it was actually Martin Luther King Sr. who was campaigning or pulling for Richard Nixon. It wasn't until Bobby Kennedy talked his brother, JFK, who was running for president, to call Coretta Scott King while MLK was being transported illegally from one prison to the next in Georgia, that MLK Sr. and the rest of the Atlanta pastors decided that they were going to throw their support behind JFK. The Democratic Party ended up printing this blue booklet, went around the country, and that's when Black people moved mainly from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. My mother was alive when all of that was going down. So we're not talking about a long history here. I think, unfortunately, Black Christians have been pawns in the political conversations because white Christians who dominate the Christian space in America like to tell you what a good Christian votes like, thinks like, and looks like. Besides the fact that that institution has been wrong on everything from slavery to abolition to Jim Crow to the new Jim Crow, they like to tell us what to vote for. So in my context, I don't really think Black Christians listen a whole lot to what the white evangelical establishment says. I do think we have our struggles with the morality and the ethics of either party. And I would say it this way. Sometimes the Democratic Party can come across as caring about systemic social sin, and maybe not as much about individual sin. And the Republican Party doesn't give a doggone about systemic social sin. In fact, they don't even believe that that's a thing. But they care a lot about, quote, individual sin. And so I see this rich theological reflection where I serve, where people are not caught up in the silliness, so to speak, of extremities. They really are concerned about what policies are going to make life better for people who don't have access to health care, to housing, to quality education. Things that, quite frankly, keep people either impoverished or granted opportunity. So there you go.
We one of the times we had you on, we talked about the fact that your church was part of the SBC,
right?
And the original, what's your original denomination of Progressive?
The Progressive National Baptist Convention.
Okay, yeah. So it was in both, and it was kind of an experiment to be in both, and the experiment didn't work.
Right.
And you ended up pulling out. Can you describe what the hope was that you had that made you think that could work, and what your view on it is now, however many years later?
Yeah, so you have to understand about me that I have several heroes, Black pastors, who are authentically Black. That's a whole nother conversation. And what I mean by that, for the person who went, is they would recognize Black culture, and they would be recognized by Black culture if they walked into indigenous Black spaces. That's really important. Pastors who have an authentic Black theological reflection, who have verifiable, trustworthy relationships with the Southern Baptist Convention. So I feel like as a younger pastor at the time, I had cover running in there. And the particular personalities I was working with, we were intent on moving the ball further in a more kingdom exploration. And so my hope, Phil, was that God would use the voice he had given me and the experience he had given me to actually turn the light bulb on for parts of the system. Boy, was I wrong. And they told me, the members of our church told me I was wrong before they went along with me. Several of them did. And so I think the advent of Trump basically showed us that there was a lot of racism hiding in theological reflection. And I knew that, having graduated from a predominantly white evangelical seminary, but I got to see it in like 2016, 2017 color. It's terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I recall, I don't know if you know this, but I'm on Twitter.
Yeah.
And when that went down, part of what surprised me was the number. There were a few Twitter voices that said, oh, we need to self-reflect as to why a church like Progressive Baptist wouldn't feel at home here. But there were many more voices that said, effectively, good riddance.
Absolutely.
And I'm just wondering, because I started getting hit very often in talking about race issues with people saying there is no black church, there is no white church.
Yeah.
It's sinful to even use those terms because you're dividing God's church. What's your response, and how do you help suburban white guys like me who end up tangling over some of these issues in public? Because here's my problem. Everybody liked VeggieTales once upon a time.
Right.
And everyone who liked VeggieTales assumes that whoever made it must be just like them. And that is whether you're a northern progressive Christian or a southern, near neo-Confederate Christian. And when people find out I'm not just like them, it's really upsetting. And so they can really get very angry.
Yeah.
How do you explain why it's valuable to speak of the black church as a distinct entity theologically and historically?
Yeah. How much time do we have? Let me first of all say, my kids really enjoyed me at Kirk Franklin on VeggieTales. God knows how long ago that was, but he was on tour, so.
It was a while.
So at least you had some representation in VeggieTales. I think history is theology taught in illustration. That there is something we learn about the hand of God and the power of God simply by an accurate historical narrative. I don't think black people, first of all, against contra what Ben Carson said, we didn't migrate here. I don't think black people were intent on starting a black church. We lost a major scholar this week. His name is Dr. David Daniels. He's a Church God in Christ bishop. And he wrote about some of the Christian roots on the western side of Africa. And I'm trying not to say names here because I don't want to get in trouble, and I know you guys get in trouble all the time. But a number of the enslaved persons came from colonies that were already Christian. And they did not come to America and get Christianity as a perk. I'm not saying everybody who was brought here was a Christian. I'm just saying it's historically inaccurate to paint these persons as godless, as Christless. A lot of them even were Catholic. Dr. David Daniels talks about that in some of his writing. So we would have historically happily wed with others who were. It's just hard when your enslaver is preaching to you the liberating power of Jesus Christ for your soul, but is interested in keeping your body in prison. So we got to be honest here with who actually gave birth to this bifurcation within the church in America. It was the same insidious theological reflection that's alive and well today in white evangelicalism. So I don't want to take ownership of how it started. I do want to take ownership for where it is, because I think those persons took that wicked dogma, sanctified it, baptized it, rid it of all of its prejudice and hatred, turned it back on the system, and brought about Frederick Douglass, Ida B. Wells, Fannie Lou Hamer, Martin King Jr., and many others. And so we need this theological reflection of black people in order to round out what's missing in American Christian theology. Actually, I would say it this way. It's probably the theological reflection of the people on the margins that's pulsating and thriving as the real thing that those at the center of the empire should pay attention to. White people are losing their minds. No offense, that they are no longer going to be the majority. That in 10, 15 years there will be no clear dominant majority in America, and what that will mean politically and economically. And I think a lot of what we're seeing right now is that rugged reaction to that.
Okay, so I was in a group of Christian leaders, I think it's 2 years ago now, and they were kind of not arguing, but talking about the rising diversity of the country and how a lot of the white evangelical church had failed to prepare for the diversity that we now see. And I was getting really annoyed in this gathering because
What's it called, the gathering? I'm sorry, I keep going.
No, I'm not going to name names, like you won't either. But I was getting annoyed because I'm like, there's nothing surprising about where we are demographically. We all knew what America would look like in 2021 or whatever year that was. And what was annoying me is we also know what America demographically is likely going to look like in 20 years from now.
Yes.
And the fastest growing segment of people in America are people of mixed racial background.
Yes.
And Kamala Harris's candidacy is another sign of that. Just like Barack Obama came from a mixed background.
Sure.
She's from Indian and African American descent. And I know some of the challenges that that's posing in white church settings. I'm curious if that's a factor, and how is it being talked about in the black church, where your church tradition has been so centered on the African American experience. And as we see, not just white communities, but also Asian, Latino, and African American communities are all intermixing more and more. And kids are being born into families with mixed backgrounds. What does that mean for the future of the black church?
Man, Obama black. Kamala Harris is black. That in America, all you have to have is one drop of black blood and you black. And if you want to play respectability politics, get pulled over and find out that they don't care where you went to school, how much money you make, or who your parents were. You black. And so I think black people, by virtue of survival, don't even see Mr. Obama as ethnically mixed or Kamala as ethnically mixed. They black. And so I think there's a solidarity, quite frankly, that upholds and undergirds this sense of identity. What I think the concern is moving forward, Skye, is this kind of ideology where ethnically minority people groups are moving into white ecclesiological structures and expecting those structures to respect their ethnicity. And so what I see are younger black people who, because they are ethnically diverse, they don't want to identify with the black church, or they want to go to an ethnically diverse church. Let me say it this way: a multiracial church, which is actually not multicultural. And so they end up getting their feelings hurt when George Floyd gets murdered, or when Laquan McDonald is shot down. And so it's more of the future that I'm concerned about. My mother, who's a blessed memory now, reminded my brothers and I that we were black. And she told us how to behave, how we had to conduct ourselves. My concern is we're not having those same conversations with our kids about the churches they go to, because they end up going to churches that are predominantly white, thinking that they're going to be embraced and welcomed, only to find out that the pastor very often has no clue about the concerns that ail them in their culture. So I think right now, you know, when you look at Obama and Kamala and you look at where we have come, America wasn't ready for Charlie Dace to be the first black president. They needed somebody like Barack Obama. Not that I would ever run, but yeah, you know, a very Harvard, well thought through policymaker who could appeal to both sides. That's what America needed. I don't even think, and this is going to get into colorism, I don't even know that America would have voted for somebody as dark as me. I think that benefits Kamala and Vice President Harris, and it benefits President Obama. But I think the same thing is true as it relates now to the future of the church. I don't think white leaders who lead multiracial churches are ready for the influx of the concerns of actual black kids that are coming into their churches.
What does, if you were speaking to a bunch of white evangelicals, say, in a hypothetical situation, what's your advice? Like, if there was, the top one or two things that people that have grown up entirely within white evangelicalism miss
Lord have mercy.
About the larger world. Help me out. Yeah. Help me out. What would benefit me the most to know if I'm a pastor in a white context?
Let me first of all say, Phil, that I'm struggling with cynicism. I know that's not why you invited me here, but I've never felt this the way that I feel now. Thinking back on that SBC thing too, that I just don't know that white evangelicals are going to change. And you're talking to a guy who has had every opportunity to migrate into white evangelical spaces, and yet refuses to and still refuses to. So this doesn't come from a point of hatred. It just is, I feel like I've been around long enough, some of the people at the top, to know they know better, but they don't care. So my answer to your question is couched in that. This is what I think you would need to know. And a supposed white evangelical audience, if I were ever given that opportunity, is that to presume that one angle of doctrinal formulation by one people group somehow is significant enough to round out the breadth of theology for the global body of Christ is asinine and arrogant. It is the height of theological malpractice that all the books we studied in seminary were written by white men, that most of our professors were white men, that most of the way we're trained to preach done by white men. I would say you got a disease and we got to get that out of your blood. And one way to get it out of your blood is what I've been asking you to do. You've had a rough year. Is to come go to church with us. Here's what I mean by that. A lot of our multiracial churches are black people moving into white spaces. We can't get y'all to move into our spaces. We can't get you to come sit under black pastoral leadership. Can't get you to see the beauty of black Christian music until it's Maverick City and they sound more like you than they do like us. It's just true. And what we end up doing is taking y'all stuff and spraying Afro sheen on it. That's a phrase from the 80s when people used to spray stuff in their head, because you gotta be supreme. You gotta be in charge. You gotta have it all. I marvel at the white families that come to Progressive week after week, because what they are saying is, we actually are turning this empire on its head. That the gospel you preach is as real and as true as anything we've ever heard. And sometimes they may even say you preach it better than some of those in our other spaces. That's not a shout out to me. That's literally what I hear. I would invite you all to get out of your suburban enclaves. We have a family that drives in from Naperville every Sunday to this 9:30 service.
They don't have any churches in Naperville.
Yeah, they don't have any.
As we've established.
Yes.
Hence you sent a missionary, Esau Macaulay.
Yes. To go and to do and to be.
And or Oak Park, we're not sure which.
Yes. And I want to be very careful in saying this, because y'all might not invite me back after I say this. So We've had so much representation about the fragility of white people and how multiracial spaces make white people feel. We tired of talking about y'all. Really. The truth is, much like what's going on in the Middle East, so much of our news networks are owned and operated by one interest group that's concerned about the Middle East, that the other group gets very little attention or much microphone time at all. I'm saying to you, that's the problem with race and Christianity in America. We don't need to talk about y'all's issues no more. CRT ain't even our issue. Like, y'all made that up. The black pastor going to say, well, what's CRT again? Like, what is? Oh, you mean that's the way we've been preaching all of these years. Now it's time for y'all to pay attention to stuff. And not just about black people. I mean, America is growing darker by the year. And it would do well for white evangelicals to get ready. Mm-hmm. And I think part of getting ready is to start, even if you don't come, start watching on YouTube. Start listening to non-white preachers. Start listening to female preachers. Break out of that box, because your kids are going to inherit a much different church than the one you grew up in.
What comes to my mind when I'm hearing you is an Upton Sinclair quote. Something like, it's very difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. And what I hear you, what my translation of what you're saying is, it's very difficult to get the white evangelical church to understand something when its church budget depends on it not understanding it. And I have met white evangelical leaders who I think do understand it. And cynically, they choose not to act on it because they know it will cost them members, it will cost them donors, it will cost them financially. And so they walk away from this knowing what the right thing to do is, because they believe in the perpetuation of their institution is a higher calling than the unity of the church across these barriers. All that to say, moving away from the cynicism a little bit, what are you learning right now? What are you reading? What are you engaging that is firing you up, that's making you hopeful, not on any of these issues necessarily, but that you are excited to be leading your church toward in the months or years ahead?
So that's a layered question. I would say, and I don't know that I'm saying this prophetically in a kind of foretelling of truth. I think a lot of what we are witnessing is burning down. And I wonder if in another 30 years, if white evangelicals will even be relevant on the American landscape. And so, believe it or not, I feel like churches like mine are getting ready for the influx of opportunity to proclaim the gospel on a non-Christian platform from a non-majority perspective. And I think because churches like ours come from the margins, we're going to be able to relate to people who live on the margins in that context. So believe it or not, I think the best days are ahead, even if 50% of Americans are not going to church on the weekend. I think it may be a leaner representation, but a more authentic representation of actual Christ followers, and not an empire, government-centered, institutionalized, structural system. So, what am I reading? All the stuff that'll get you in trouble in Florida. Believe it or not, I'm rereading We Were in Power 8 Years by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I'm getting ready for his other book that's coming in a week or so called The Message. I am reading also a biography on Malcolm X by Manning Marable. I read the one by Alex Haley when I was in college, and this one is a kind of new spin on it. I finished Jonathan Ives' Pulitzer Prize-winning bio on Martin King, and started his bio on Ali. So right now, for whatever reason, I'm in this kind of biography reading mode of some significant African Americans who helped to shape and reshape culture. I don't know that I'm reading a lot of other Christian stuff other than the work that I'm doing for my own preparation.
In Skye's books?
The people, I want to call some mutual friends names, but the people I know, they love Skye. And they're like, do you read Skye's emails? I get them every day. And so I keep up with what Skye is printing, but on a daily basis.
He needs to know what to correct in his people, how I'm leading them astray.
What is the white evangelical up to today?
Half white, half.
Half white evangelical, yeah. What
Yes,
do you, we had you, I think I talked to you, I don't know if it was in 20 or 21, and you'd said something where you and some other African-American pastors were participating in marches, but in some cases, the young African-American activists at the front of the march didn't want the pastors at the front of the march with them.
Absolutely.
How has that changed? Has that been consistent since? Do you see an activist community that is still rejecting the role of the pastors?
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. This is, and I think I said this to you then because we were on the computer, this is the first generation of African Americans that are fighting for social progress apart from the church. There are so many community activists in Chicago now who are not tethered to a local church at all, any kind of religious structure or system. So they have this burning for justice. They have no idea from whence it comes. And the terrible indictment, I think, is that some of them seem to be making more progress than the black pulpit. It's almost like some parts of the black pulpit have gone silent while these precious young people are in the streets fighting for this progress. It's worse, in my opinion. Some people would call that better. I think it's worse than it was 4 years ago. But because if, number one, I don't think they're going to accomplish the justice that they're after. But if they do make progress and they're somehow able to convince people that it was done apart from the gospel, we have no moral Jesus moorings to keep the recently oppressed from becoming the oppressors in new spaces. I think the gospel is the only thing that can cure what it diagnoses, that can liberate both the heart and the body.
What do you worry about more? A generation of black activists that have lost their connection to the black church, or a generation of white middle Americans that have been taught to resent their new minority status?
Maybe both, but in my context, the black people more. I do think, though, that a number of these younger black activists, they're going to end up turning to see Christ. I really do. I think the work is too hard. It's too depressing, and it feels too futile to do without hope. And we know that very often hope is discovered in the very conditions that cause despair. That it's when you're in the trenches that if your eyes are open and your heart is pricked, that's where you're going to discover that Jesus is the answer for the world today.
You mentioned that the young activists in the streets are making more of an impact than the prophetic pulpits in black churches. What's silencing the black pulpit?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they are prophetic pulpits, but having gone to white schools.
So they were trained by the wrong people.
No, I kid you not. I kid you not. There is and a number of black people going to white churches. We're not immune to it either. But I can't tell you the number of black pastors I know who are such exquisite expositors, but they lack any kind of social conscience at all. And the only place we got that from was from the white academy, the white conservative academy, because there is another side, and that is those who have such a social conscience, but they have no high view of scripture, and that came from a liberal white academy. Either way it goes, underneath it all, is a kind of sinister, diabolical scheme to rid the preacher of a confidence in God's word that produces a fight for justice, or it lulls them to sleep in just looking for heaven and not fighting for justice on earth. I think that's scary. And when we get backstage, I'll give you some names of people who I think are leading the fore. But I do think, again, as dark as the moment may seem, or it's probably going to get darker, to be honest with you, I think there's tremendous hope on the other side. I see a generation of younger black preachers who are aware of where culture is, but they are convinced about what the scriptures say. And so they have a kind of cultural credibility, but they also have a heart that beats for the church.
So when because we've talked a lot about the fundamentalist modernist split in the early 20th century, and one of the things that we've often mentioned is it's not a split that you saw in the black church. So you don't see African American Christians wrestling as much with, I have to reject that because I'm a part of this side and they're a part of that side. But as you just brought up, if you go through white academia, you're entering into that split in a certain sense, and you're going to be taught a certain way, whereas that wouldn't be part of your own experience, or your own tradition. Is there a need for, a parallel academia which doesn't show the bifurcation, the social, gospel bifurcation of white academia?
No, absolutely. And what an amazing question. And I feel like if people who pick this podcast up wanted to give to the building of a new institution, it would be that. And I don't have that institution right now. I do remember my first year in seminary, a pastor who I know and love told me to be careful. And he said to me, we're sending you there, but you are already called by God to preach. You already know how to preach. Get the book smarts and the academic work, but don't change fundamentally who you are. Listen to what he was saying. The church was that institution. Somehow or another, and Dr. Doug Sweeney, who's now the dean at Beeson, used to talk about this all the time. Somehow or another, we've raised the value of the academy over the value of the church. It should always be the other way around. The church forms theologians. The church houses theologians. The church produces cutting-edge reflection on God, not the academy. When we started outsourcing that to the academy, I think we fell apart in a real sense. And so we've got to return to the church for the training of preachers and pastors and writers, and not merely leave that to our academic institutions.
What about the producers of children's videos?
Well, that's a pretty lucrative business.
Oh yeah, there's
and the church
big money, big money in YouTube videos that no one pays to watch.
The Holy Post is sponsored by the Fresh Pressed Olive Oil Club. The prophet Elisha once performed a miracle to help a widow who was in a terrible situation. She needed more olive oil. Lots of us are trying to eat healthy, and a healthy diet includes great olive oil. You need to know about TJ Robinson, a guy who makes farm-fresh, award-winning olive oil and sells it direct to you. TJ's olive oil is incredibly delicious on salads, veggies, pasta, meat, fish, you name it. As an introduction to his Fresh Pressed Olive Oil Club, TJ is willing to send you a full-size $39 bottle of one of the world's finest artisanal olive oils, fresh from the new harvest, for just $1 to help him cover shipping. And there's no commitment to buy anything now or ever. Sure, it's great if a prophet comes to your house and gives you free olive oil from heaven, but that's probably not going to happen. TJ's Fresh Pressed Olive Oil Club might be the next best thing. Get your free $39 bottle for just $1 shipping and taste the difference freshness makes. Go to getfreshholypost.com. That's getfreshholypost.com for a free bottle and pay just $1 shipping. The Holy Post is sponsored by Faithful Counseling.
I'm not super good at people stuff. I like ideas and technology and puppets. When Lisa and I got married, it was a shock to see just how different we approach the world and each other. The thoughtful gift of marriage counseling from one of our parents was a huge help in those early years. Faithful Counseling can help you get through life's rough spots. With more than 3,000 licensed therapists across all 50 states, Faithful Counseling makes it easy to find a great therapist that'll work for you. You can meet over video or phone sessions, and changing therapists is easy and free until you find the right fit. So don't struggle alone. Let Faithful Counseling match you with a licensed therapist who can help you grow into the best version of yourself. Visit faithfulcounseling.com/holypost and get the professional, faith-based counseling you need. And there's a special offer for our listeners. Right now, you can get 10% off your first month at faithfulcounseling.com/holypost. Thanks again to Faithful Counseling for sponsoring this episode.
Mike, we got time to take some questions.
Yeah. We've got a few questions here. We got one over here.
What would you say to yourself in 2012 for Skye and Phil when you started the podcast? What would you say to yourself in 2012 about walking with Jesus? If you could tell yourself anything back then.
I would say if you do this, it's going to get rough. Because it was really easy to hide behind children's cartoons and not really you could take a stand in a silly way in a silly song, or like, did they actually say something about gated communities in there? Or that's probably just a joke. Like, oh, well, I'll leave that up to you. But doing this is completely different, because you just, you're putting yourself out there, and it's rough, and there's more attack and more friendly fire, than I would have predicted. So get ready and focus on good Bible teaching. Go to Pastor Date's church, start early and go off, so that you're in community, because community has turned out to be the most important thing, because we love all you guys, but you don't come over when the car breaks down, or when, my wife is sick, or when our daughter's struggling. But we have this tight little local church community that we've developed that has been instrumental to being able to do this, because there's people that I really know and that I'm really known by. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Oh, goodness. That's a great question. To piggyback on what Phil said a little bit, I don't know. I mean, in 2012, I was working for Christianity Today. I think I'd written 2 books at that point, but I didn't have the reputation that Phil Vischer did, obviously. Didn't create VeggieTales. So for me to get on a podcast that nobody was listening to and share ideas that might be slightly challenging or controversial, I didn't have a lot to lose. He had a ton. And the fact that he has continued to put himself out there, not just on Twitter, but like, I hope you guys appreciate the risk he took with his reputation to give me a platform and a lot of other voices a platform that the church needed to hear. Like, at the time in 2012, I did not appreciate the risk he was taking. I think partly because we were both ignorant and dumb, and we didn't realize that anyone was listening to us. But once we did realize that, and there was a cost to pay, he kept paying it. And I'm grateful for that, and I think we are all grateful for that. But what I would tell myself is, don't lose heart when individuals and institutions that don't display that kind of courage don't display that kind of courage. I think that's been the single biggest surprise over the last 14 years, is so many, I've been in environments and I've seen people I respect and institutions I was shaped by capitulate because they lack that kind of courage. And that at times was really disheartening. Sometimes institutions I was very close to that were important to me, other times just bigger ones. But individuals and institutions I never thought would caved. And I would have prepared myself more for that in 2012 if I knew that was coming. Which is, to again piggyback on what Phil said, that's why those relationships of courageous friendship and commitment to Christ matter so much, because when things come under pressure and they break, it's easy to lose heart if you don't have that core group around you that is strong.
I would actually love to hear Kaitlyn and Dr. Dates answer the same question. If you could go back to 2012, 2014 version of yourself, what would you say?
Where were you in 2012, Kaitlyn?
I was in high school. You know, it's funny. While I was listening to you two answer, I was trying to think of all the things I would say of like, it's about to get so weird, and like the VeggieTales guy you're gonna see like every week. That's so weird. And then like you guys got dark, so I started thinking like, oh, would I tell her not to go work for that church that went really badly, or would I? And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I wouldn't really want to tell her anything, because I want her to be surprised by everything good and everything that was deeply hard. While I would not wish it on my worst enemy, gave me such a fiercer love for the church and a more desperate desire for Christ to return and make all things new. And I just wouldn't change any of that. So I think if I would tell her anything, it would just be like, you have no idea like what is coming. You're not going to marry that guy you think you're going to marry. Like, you're going to go to seminary yourself instead of following him to a seminary, and it's so much better that way. And it's just going to get so fun. It's going to get wild, and you're going to, there's a lot of heartbreak, but also, I mean, thinking about the podcast, because that's what y'all were talking about. Like, I actually wish I couldn't go back to 2012 me, but I could go back to like early 2020 me before I joined the podcast. And things were really hard at my church, and I could just say, I know that you're watching all these people that you thought you could trust betray that trust. And I know you're watching a lot of men in particular that you respect treat you in ways that are so confusing. Like, you just didn't believe this was possible. But there are going to be people you really respect who treat you with respect. And that is a gift. So hold on for that to happen, because it will happen.
Charlie. 12-year-old Charlie.
I probably would have told myself to invest in Apple or Tesla or something. I was hoping for one of those. I would probably address some of the naivete and tell myself this isn't the 90s. You know, I think we've seen such a strange turn in church in America that at the time I was preparing to go into ministry, I just thought it was going to be like my predecessors. We're on a much different cultural landscape. We are in a more difficult terrain, and I don't have it figured out now, so I'm not sure exactly what to say to that, Charlie, but I probably would tell him this is going to cost you, and there's no turning back, and it's too late right now to turn back.
Can we just give a round of applause for Dr. Dates for being our guest? Okay, we have a game to play real quick. This is called the Holy Post Decathlon. It is 10 trivia questions from 10 different categories that will test what kind of a Holy Post host are you. We will find the true host. Are you ready? So the way we don't have...
I feel like I have a disadvantage here.
No, Kaitlyn, not at all. So the way this is going to work, I will read the topic, and then the question, when you are ready to answer it, they're all multiple choice. You're going to say your name. That's how I know who's first. Yeah, I don't have buzzards. I'm sorry. All right, we ran out of all the production money.
We have to say our name?
Just say your name.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that work? Sure, it works. Of course it works.
Can we beep?
You can beep. Fine.
Can we say the other person's name so they get it wrong?
You have to make it so hard all the time. Okay.
If only we had like a bell to ring.
We could fight
You're
over
going to
it.
share over... All right, fine. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Oh.
Now.
Oh, this is... This is not going to be good. All right, we are
I
ready.
reach it with the microphone.
Topic number 1, ukuleles. In Hawaiian, ukulele means what? Which of the following? A.
Wait, I got a question. Can we ring before you've read all the answers?
Yeah, but you can't answer more than once. So once you've answered, you're done.
Oh.
Okay?
All right.
A. Dancing strings. B. Leaping pig butt worms. C. Happy cricket. D. Jumping flea. Skye.
Jumping flea.
That is correct. Good work. 1 point for Skye. Okay.
You brought that up on a story long
I
time
did?
ago.
No, I just got it from the internet, Kaitlyn. There's this thing called Google that works very well.
Okay.
Okay. Topic number 2, hats. Skye really likes hats lately. Okay, in which city is it illegal to wear a hat while dancing? A. Fargo, North Dakota. B. Mobile, Alabama. C. Branson, Missouri. D. Salt Lake City, Utah.
Salt Lake City.
Incorrect.
Fargo.
Yes. Fargo is the correct answer.
Why?
I was born in North Dakota.
I
They
don't.
tell you when you're born
yeah,
you can't
it's a
wear
requirement.
Okay.
Okay, topic number 3, Taco Bell. What percentage of Taco Bell beef is real beef?
Whatever. If it's not 100%, that's not right.
Well, let's find out. A, 48. B, 74. C, 88. D, 100%.
I'm going to say it's 100%.
Of course not, Skye.
Oh,
it's
come
Taco Bell.
They had that scandal a while ago, and I thought they corrected
Nope,
that.
apparently not. No,
71.
It's not. It's not 74. Phil,
What were the other options?
48 or 88?
Can I call a friend?
No.
40.
I realized there was an 88.
I'm going to go for 88.
That is correct. Hey!
Wait a minute.
Ah, close game.
What's the other
Crickets.
12%?
Crickets.
Jumping
it's-
crickets.
Jumping fleas.
Jumping fleas.
All right. Next topic, animal news. Now, this is from an episode, all right? In Australia, a wild animal stole 18 beers from campers and fought a cow.
I believe you.
Who was it?
It was Skye.
It was me, and I know this story.
Yeah.
And it was in Australia.
Yep.
He said
I said that.
It was a kangaroo.
Incorrect.
No, of course it's not.
All right. A, kangaroo. B, pig. C, dingo. D, crocodile.
Pig.
Yes, that is correct.
That rung a bell. It rung a yes, pig. It was a pig. Because my first thought was bear, because we did a story about a three-legged bear that drunk a bunch of White Claw.
Yeah.
Three-legged bear breaks into camper home, drinks White Claw. And they had video to prove it.
So many drunken animal stories. You can't
I know.
keep track of them all. Okay, next topic. Kaitlyn, I think you're going to like this one. Butt news.
Thank you.
Which animal can breathe out of its butt?
Lots.
You didn't ring the bell.
I rang it.
Skye.
It's a turtle.
That is correct.
Yeah, but it's not the only one.
Well, you didn't. Skye rang the bell and you did not.
Because, and I didn't even cover this story yet because I don't think Kaitlyn will like it. One of the Nobel Prizes in medicine this year went to the researchers who discovered that most mammals can absorb oxygen through their anuses. Nobel, Kaitlyn, that's classy.
Did you plan
Extra
that?
points,
Was
extra
that-
points.
Was that planned?
I think the Holy Spirit planned it, Kaitlyn.
Wow.
Who moves like the wind?
Oh my gosh.
Clearly. Okay, next topic. Contemporary Christian music. Complete the lyric from this popular Reliant K song.
Oh, okay. Yes.
The girls ask the guys, it's always a surprise.
Yeah.
There's nothing better, baby.
The Sadie Hawkins dance.
That is the name of the song, but I asked you to complete the lyric.
That's the next
There's nothing
line.
It's
better.
not the next.
Oh,
Nothing better,
girls got
baby.
Guys are such a big surprise. Nothing better, baby, than nothing better, baby? Is that really what the line is?
There's nothing better
than my sweater. Something about my sweater.
That's close.
And my... what?
Do you like my sweater?
Okay, you
Do you
cheated.
like my sweater?
That's called sisterhood. Yes.
I had the floor.
Nope.
I'm giving the point to Skye.
Yes, so many points. No.
Only way to win, not to play the game.
Not to play. Next topic, Taylor Swift.
This is going to be embarrassing. I'm so nervous.
I'm going to read 4 lyrics. 3 of them are the Message translation of Lamentations. 1 is from a Taylor Swift song.
I got this.
Identify the Taylor Swift lyric. A, you'll find out what it's like to get drunk and wake up with nothing. B, time turns flames to embers. C, I weep buckets of tears, and not a soul within miles around cares. D, I gave up on life altogether.
No.
D.
Incorrect. B is correct.
Actually, that made this so much better for me. Thank you. That's...
Okay.
Your eyes closed like you were sensing something.
No, I knew the second he said all of those things. Yeah.
3 more. The next topic is the Holy Post. Which of these is not a real title of a Holy Post episode?
Oh, gosh.
A.
He writes the titles. That's not fair.
Well, to be fair, all of these are from when it was called the Phil Vischer podcast.
Yeah, I didn't write those. You wrote those.
Ooh, okay.
She wasn't even born, so how's she supposed to guess?
A. Hibernating turtles, puppies, and vampire churches. B. Dudes, grizzly bears, Hobby Lobby, and robots. C. The Pope, Batman and magic. Or D. Alien hunting and arranged marriages.
This is yes or no?
So, one of these is not a real title. The rest of them were.
C.
The Pope, Batman, and magic?
Yeah.
Incorrect. That is a real title.
I was just going to guess
is a
something.
real
I knew I
title.
was
Go
gonna
through them
get
one
it,
more
so-
time.
Yep. Hibernating turtles, puppies, and vampire churches. Dudes, grizzly bears, Hobby Lobby, and robots. Or alien hunting and arranged marriages.
Alien hunting and arranged marriages.
Well, that is also a title of an episode.
That is so embarrassing.
All right. I'm gonna go with, I think it's B. But the robots.
Yeah, that's...
Incorrect. Also, somehow a real. This is not a title. Hibernating turtles, puppies, and vampire churches.
But
That was
But
the
we
one I
have
thought
talked
was.
about
we've talked about hibernating.
Yes.
And vampire.
Oh, that was
True.
a trick question.
I did a whole.
It's not an actual title. It's a combination of 2 different titles. Oh. Hey.
Tricky.
All right.
Foul.
You should know your show better. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, next one. The topic is Mike Erie. What is Mike Erie's middle name?
I already did it. Carl.
It is Carl. Okay.
I said Charles last
This
time.
is our last question. It's actually worth 10 points. Woo! So whoever gets this one.
What's the score?
It is, I don't know. Was anyone keeping track? We'll
You
put back
don't
the tape.
invite Kaitlyn to a game and then not keep the score.
Exactly.
It's very
I
close.
was losing, though, so I was not
But
keeping score.
conveniently, the last question is worth 10 points.
Oh,
Do you
okay.
remember what a sword drill is?
Totally.
For those of you who did not grow up in evangelical subculture, a sword drill is I will give a reference in the Bible, and the first one to find that reference and read it out loud for us wins the game. All right, are you ready? Let's find out if you can do this. The reference is Psalm 149:4. Psalm 149:4.
For the Lord...
Read it, Phil. Read it. Read it.
You had to stand up.
Yes. What is it, Phil?
For the Lord takes delight in his people. He crowns the humble with victory.
And victory you will have.
All right, thank you. Let's give it up for these folks tonight. Pretty much every week or every episode, I think and then resist putting in Slack, wow, that was so great again this week, because it gets like 1 thumbs up from Kaitlyn. But wasn't that so good tonight? So good. Let's give it up for these 3 and Dr. Dates.
The Holy Post Podcast is a production of Holy Post Media, produced by Mike Stralow, editing by Seth Gorvet. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by subscribing to Holy Post Plus at holypost.com/plus. Also, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary, plus ukulele and occasional butt news. Visit holypost.com for show notes, news stories, Holy Post merchandise, and much, much more.